Well, anticipating a few questions on banks, I decided we should start using bank language here to describe the and Charlie. The situation in banking is very similar to what it's always been in banking, that fear is contagious, always. And historically, sometimes the fear was justified, and sometimes it wasn't. My dad lost his job in 1931 because of a bank run, and they had a bank run on the state banks. And the head of the Omaha National Bank said, well, we're a national bank, and they didn't have a run on the national banks. And of course, they both faced the same problem. So it used to be that if you saw people lining up at a bank, the proper response was to get into the line. And you'd always leave it. And the story is that Sidney Weinberg of Goldman Sachs, during one of the great bank runs back in 1907 or thereabouts, had a job as a runner at Goldman Sachs and asked his boss if he could take the week off. And the boss said, sure, not much is going on anyway. So he got in line, whether it was the Knickerbocker Trust or wherever. And as he got toward the front of the line, he sold his place in line to somebody. He didn't have an account at the bank, but that was an asset. And the banking system has changed so much over the years, and we did something enormously sensible, in my view. When we set up the FDIC, as many as 2,000 banks had failed in 1 year back after World War I. I mean, bank runs were just part of the picture. And if you have people that are worried about whether their money is safe in a bank and all trying to withdraw it, you can't run an economy very well. So the FDIC was very logical. It's got changed over the years some. But here we are in 2023, and we actually see the FDIC pay off at 100 cents on the dollar to everybody, or make it available on all demand deposits. And yet you still have people very worried about their periodically, geographically, all kinds of crazy ways. And that just shouldn't happen. So the messaging has been very poor. It's been poor by the politicians, who sometimes have an interest in having it poor. It's been poor by the agencies, and I'd say it's been poor by the press. I mean, you shouldn't have so many people that misunderstand the fact that although there may be a debt ceiling, it's going to get changed. Although there's a $250,000 limit on FDIC, the FDIC and the U.S. government and the American public have no interest in having a bank fail and have deposits actually lost by people. We had a demonstration project the weekend of Silicon Valley Bank, and the public is still confused. So it's something to have a law that was passed in a law that became effective in 1934, although modified in some ways, not understood about something as important as the banking system. I don't think the American public is that dumb. And I made that offer over in Tokyo, incidentally, that I haven't heard from anybody that wants to take up my $1 million bet on whether the public will lose money if they have a demand deposit at a bank, no matter what the size. So that's the world we live in. It means that a lighted match can turn into a conflagration, or it can be blown out. And who knows what will happen. And we don't have any worry. We keep our money in cash and treasury bills at Berkshire, because we keep 128 billion or whatever it was at the end of the quarter, and we want to be there if the banking system temporarily even gets stalled in some way. It shouldn't. I don't think it will, but I think it could. And I think that the incentives in bank regulation are so messed up, and so many people have an interest in having them messed up, that it's totally crazy. I mean, the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were doing 40 or so % of the mortgage business in the United States. That is huge. They were regulated, just those two companies were regulated by some group, I forget what they called it, but they had 150 people that were in charge of just figuring out whether Freddie and Fannie were doing the right thing. Well, I could have done it. Charlie could have done it. And I'm not sure they needed an assistant even to do it. But the incentives were all wrong. And Freddie and Fannie, which were doing fine in August or apparently doing fine in July and August of 2008, were put into conservatorship, early in September. And the things that followed from that were just incredible. So there are second order and third order and fourth order effects that are somewhat unpredictable as to what they will be and the sequence and all that. But things change. And if people think that deposits are sticky anymore, they're just living in a different era. You press a button. You don't have to get in a line and wait for days and have the teller counting out the money slowly in gold so that you hope the line goes away. You can have a run in a few seconds. So the way it hasn't been addressed properly is a problem, and who knows where it leads. But you'll have to have a punishment for the people that do the wrong thing. And if you take First Republic, for example, you could look at their 10K and you could see that they were offering non-government guaranteed mortgages in jumbo amounts at fixed rates, sometimes for 10 years before they changed to floating. And I mean, that's a crazy proposition. If it's to the advantage of the bank, they get it. They get the guy coming in and says, "I'll refinance at 1.5% and then 1%." And if it's advantage the other way, the fellow keeps it out 10 years. You don't give options like that. But that's what First Republic was doing, and it was a plain sight. And the world ignored it till it blew up. And some of the stock in some of these banks that were held by insiders was sold, and who knows whether they had a plan or whether some plan that was innocent or whether they started sensing what was coming. But you do know that the directors are not going to be able to read some book or anything like that, but they do have the ability to hold the CEO accountable. The CEO gets the bank in trouble. Both the CEO and the directors should suffer. The stockholders of the future shouldn't suffer. They didn't do anything. It doesn't teach anybody any lessons or anything. It teaches the lesson is that if you run a bank and you screw it up, you're still a rich guy, and the clubs don't drop you, and the charity groups don't quit asking you to their benefits, and the world goes on. That is not a good lesson to teach people who are holding the behavior of the economy in their hands. So I think there's some work to be done, but I don't think it's not a difficult problem. It's just we've screwed up the answer and we've screwed up the communication of it. Charlie?
Well, I'm so old-fashioned that I kind of liked it better when banks didn't do investment banking. That makes me very outmoded in the modern world.
And the country decided it was contrary to public interest for a while, and then then the banks wanted to get back into it.
Did they ever?
Yeah. No, I mean,
I don't think having a bunch of bankers, all of them were trying to get rich, leads to good things. But I think a banker should be more like an engineer. He's more like into avoiding trouble than he is getting rich.
yeah, and they could do fine.
They can do fine that way. And I think we had a big mistake when we created a bank where everybody who joins it finds to get rich.
Yeah.
It's a contradiction in values.